Hey, it's Buddy, and welcome to my channel, Buddy Cooks. In this video, I'm going to be making crunch wraps, and these are pretty simple but really good, and I have a secret ingredient that takes these to the next level. As part of our crunch wrap components, I'll show you how I make my Pico de Gallo, then I'll make the guacamole, and this is what I'm calling the secret ingredient, which is Chipotle sauce that I'll show you how to make. If you try these crunch wraps, you can always buy the pico and the guac at the store, but you should definitely try to make the chipotle sauce. By the end of the video, we'll have a delicious crunch wrap like this. Do keep in mind that these are pretty hefty, so it's not a bad idea to split one, but I always manage to scarf down a whole one. Starting with the Pico de Gallo, I'm going to dice up 6 Roma tomatoes, and to do this, I'll quarter the tomato and then cut out the seeds, because if I keep the seeds in, the pico is going to have too much water. Now I'll go ahead and slice these tomatoes up long ways and then dice them fairly small. After all 6 tomatoes are diced, we need a nice big bowl for those, and we'll move on to dicing up an onion. I diced 1 medium white onion, but you could use red onion if you prefer, or really just your onion of choice. And I like these nice and small for this as well. The onion goes into the bowl with the tomatoes, and now it's time for the peppers. I will use 2 serrano and 2 jalapeno peppers, which will give the pico a nice kick. So choose to your liking depending on your heat preference. I cut the peppers in half and then I cut them into quarters to dice them up. And at the end I give them an extra chop to make sure that they're very fine. Let's toss those peppers in, and now it's time to chop our cilantro. I use about half of this head of cilantro, and I chop it up finely as well to add it to the party. Now we need the juice of 2 limes. We're almost done making the pico, but we still need to add the salt, which I use 2 teaspoons here. All that's left after that is to mix everything together, and then you want to put it into the fridge for a few hours and let all the flavors meld together. Now let's move on to the guacamole. I have 3 avocados, which we'll scoop out into a bowl, and using your masher of choice, start mashing them up until you have a fairly consistent mixture. For the guac, I chopped up the rest of that head of cilantro from earlier, as well as diced another half of a white onion, and for the peppers this time I use 1 serrano and 1 jalapeno pepper. Then we're going to squeeze in the juice of 1 lime. Now we just need to mix all of this goodness up, but I did forget one thing before I did the mixing, which was the salt. So I had to mix it up twice. I used 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt for the guac. Now, moving on to the chipotle sauce, I add 3/4 of a cup of mayo to our blender, and I use 1 can of chipotles in adobo sauce. I'm using a NutriBullet, which works really well, but you can use a regular blender or an immersion blender works great too. Now we toss in some cilantro, and we're going to use the juice of 1 lime again here. I'll season with some smoked paprika, followed by half a teaspoon of salt, and about the same of fresh ground black pepper. I give a little mix so that everything will blend together a bit easier, and also I just remembered that I had the honey out for a reason, and I add about a tablespoon of honey. Now let's blend it all together. And about halfway through, I go ahead and shake it all up to make sure everything is blended thoroughly. Now I can just funnel this chipotle sauce into a squeeze bottle. This stuff has a really good smoky flavor and you can use it with a lot of different stuff. For instance, I added some into mac and cheese and it really kicked it up a notch. Or just use it as a dipping sauce. Now it's time to assemble our crunch wrap. And I did skip the making of the taco meat. It's nothing fancy, I just follow the directions from the taco seasoning, and with the exception that I do like to simmer it for a little bit longer to cook off some extra water. You do need to find extra large 12 to 13 inch tortillas, which can be tricky. I have a tortilleria down the road, and I also have found them at Winco if you have that available. Alright, first we lay down some shredded cheese, and this was labeled as Mexican melting cheese, but use whatever cheese you want. Next goes our taco meat, and if you're like me, you always ask for extra at Taco Bell, so we load this up. Now it's time for a little of that artificial queso, for which we're going to be using the jalapeno cheddar Fritos cheese. After that, it's time for a healthy squeeze of the chipotle sauce. We put some in the inside, but we of course are going to be using it with each bite as well. We top that with a tostada, and then it's time for our guac, followed by the pico. And because we want this to be healthy, we finish with some lettuce on the top. With the extra large tortilla, we can fold it to the center and overlap, and then fold the corners to give us our hexagon. Now you can use a pan on the stove to toast up your crunch wrap, but I have this griddler device that works perfectly. Now that this crunch wrap is ready, we use a little pizza cutter action and take a peek inside. I'd say that looks pretty good. Alright, that's it for this video, and if you decide to make these, make sure to let me know how they turned out in the comments. Thanks, and I'll see you later.